Harinam Chintamani discusses how one should work to find the ways that one can give attention to the holy name. And you may notice in any relationship that you have that the main ingredient is the attention you give it. For instance, if I'm talking to someone who's explaining to me something extremely valuable, like last night, I stayed a little later at Prabhupada's room with some godbrothers, and one of them was speaking about some history that was very interesting. At the same time, a thought came into my mind, I wonder how late it is. But I resisted looking at my watch, because if I just went like this, how long does that take? Approximately.
Half a second.
Half a second? My interlocutor would have then said, "Oh, you have to go?" And it's that break of attention from listening to somebody that can suddenly change the relationship. So Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura mentions in his teachings on chanting the holy name of the Lord that the most important ingredient is giving attention. And there is a way, at a certain point, when we have become fascinated with the sound of the holy name, mad-guṇa-śruti-mātreṇa mayi sarva-guhāśaye manogatir avicchina yatha gangam basom budao. Kapila Dev says the mind will be carried along just like the Ganges is carried and carries everything with it, and it doesn't stop for anything or anybody, it just goes. Manogatir avicchina, no stoppage. But in the beginning, it takes a long time to stay the mind's tendencies to look at problems and try to solve them. And we do it even when we sleep, at least I do. I wake up like, oh, what am I going to do about this or that? But in the time of meditation on the holy name, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura says, find the ways and means to completely focus your mind. And he suggests various ways and gives the directive that find the ways that works for you. So sometimes when we mention sit down, take a minute to breathe, look at your surroundings, look internally, someone might say, well, that's different. That's not something I've learned before. There's no harm in it, because the ultimate purpose of this is to bring one's full attention to the holy name. Be very deliberate. What's more, I may have mentioned yesterday, but in the process of deity worship, in the Padditis, in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, there's a way in which it's mentioned that after collecting the ingredients to worship the deity, then one has to take a moment to do that stage is called yoga, or connection with Krishna, letting go of many of the concerns that one has. In fact, you may read in the Nectar of Devotion that for a person whose relative has passed, there's a contamination period in which you're not supposed to worship the deity. Have any of you heard of that before? What is the contamination period? It's the contamination of the senses, and the mind becomes so distracted because you're thinking of the loved one if you were very attached, and you can't concentrate on the deity. So there's a way in which the contamination interaction with various other thoughts, concerns. So in the beginning, when we start deity worship, or when we start chanting the holy name, if we take a minute or two to become internally focused, kshetragya, notice that you're the field and that you're the observer of the field. And you can start off in the right position. Does anybody have any questions about the process? Yes? Can you help us understand?
I was wondering how we could practically understand that Krishna's name is Krishna and understand the significance of that.
That's a great question. How do you know that you're alive right now? You just know. When you woke up this morning, if you just notice that you're alive, you'll know it. And in a similar way, someone might say, how can you prove Scripture is real? In the same way that you know you're alive. When you read Scripture, it resonates with your spiritual intelligence, and Supersoul says, yeah, that this is real, and you see it for yourself. It's self-revealing. So the holy name is self-revealing also. You don't need a torch to see the sun. And when the holy name appears, then you just, hey, the sun's up. Because you exist, and so does Krishna. And it proves itself. You prove yourself, and you also prove the existence of Krishna. Because you exist, Krishna exists. Otherwise you wouldn't exist. You're conscious. You know you exist. You can become aware that you are. So in a similar way, the holy name isn't intellectualized. It's not a mental construct. Neither is the idea that you're alive. And there are years and years of history of people trying to figure out, how do you know that you know? Epistemology. And we know because we're able to know. We're gya, kshetra gya. We're able to know we're in a body and we're not the body. And we're able to also see the supersoul and realize that I'm getting sustenance, I'm getting intelligence from the supersoul. And when we have that awareness, when we start chanting, and we're not swimming in this maelstrom of thoughts, of problems, that's when we chant and we don't get anything, because we're not really connecting with the holy name. So we have to have this clear connection. So having said all that as a preamble, I don't want to take too much more time so we can actually chant. And if you'll just humor me and start with a little pranayama. In fact, that's even there in the ancient padhatis for deity worship. It starts with some pranayama so that one can center oneself. You can try closing your eyes just for a moment and sitting up a little straight-ish, like a yogi. And then bring your attention to your breath. And you can slow down your mind by regulating your breathing. You can do this at any time, but before japa, it's very helpful. And try regulation of 5 and 5. 5 natural breaths counts in and 5 out, and just watch it for a few breaths. And now, next time you inhale, say the first half of the mantra in your mind, and watch the syllables, and then when you do the exhale, say the second half of the mantra in your mind, and do that 2 times so you see the full Mahamantra twice. And now, on the screen, you can open your eyes and you'll notice that we have this way of purifying our conception by remembering that we're not our body. We'll recite together the Bhuta Shuddhi, the purification of the elements. I'm by nature the eternal servant of Krishna, but by misfortune, due to being inimical towards him since a time immemorial, I've been wandering in the cycle of birth, death, the material world, being burnt by the threefold miseries. Now, as a result of some unimaginable good fortune, by the mercy of my spiritual master, I know that I am infinitesimal, living being, completely apart from the gross and subtle body. Now, by the order of my spiritual master, I have attained the good fortune of serving his lotus feet, as well as the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu, and Shri Radha Madan Mohan. Naham Vipro Nacha Narapatir, altogether. Vaiśeṣika. Again. Naham Vipro Nacha Narapatir, Napi Vaisho Nashudro, Naham Varni Nacha Gripatir, No Vanasto Yatirva, Kintu Projan Nikila Paramhananda Purnam Vritapi. Gopi Paratu Parakamalir Dāsa. Which means just forget about any other designation or worries that you have about being in a body, and just think, I am the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. And then just before chanting, just remember Krishna as a person, and he's your friend, he's a suhrit, and make a statement. Krishna, this is why I'm chanting today, very purposefully. Just make your own internal statement. And we'll start with the Panchatattva Mahamantra. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta. And as you chant, whatever thoughts come, emotions come into your mental system, just notice them, embrace them, and then just let them go and keep chanting. And you can label them if you want and say, I'll do that later, but right now I have only one business, focusing on the holy name. Hare Krishna. Just a brief intervention. And just a thought experiment which may be helpful. First, the question, can you be aware of two things at the same time? If you're reading a book and you read a paragraph, but you're thinking about your final exams next week, will you know what you read, or can your eyes be going through the sentences and then not know what you read? Or can somebody be speaking to you and you're thinking about, when's this person going to stop talking? And then they say, what did I just say? And you say, I have no idea. So while we're sitting here, we're in this physical room. Are you aware of your feet? Were you aware of them when you were looking at the shoe rack? So there's a way in which we're consciousness, and we can point our consciousness in any direction. And wherever our consciousness goes, then our energy all goes in that same direction. And so this practice of chanting, the main feature is to be focused on the chanting, which means, just in a very simple term, be aware that you're chanting, and notice that you may be chanting, but your awareness may be somewhere else. You may be chanting, and then all of a sudden you'll notice, oh, I was thinking about the shoe rack. And then I didn't really hear the mantra. So when you notice that your mind went somewhere else, then just bring it back to the chanting again and again and practice that. And notice that your mind goes somewhere. Don't worry about it. Just notice that that's what happened. And then gently come back and focus it on the holy name. And the main directive is be aware that you're chanting. And try to get to a state where, as Dronacharya was teaching his students, don't be aware of anything else except for the eye of the fish. And just stay there. And try it and see if you can hit that point where you're not thinking of the shoe rack, you're not thinking of the front door, you're not thinking of these chairs or your feet. There's only one thing, it's the eye of the fish. You're only keeping your attention just on the chanting. And don't worry about whether Krishna is the same as his name or not. You don't have to intellectualize anything. Just bring your awareness to the holy name and see if you can keep bringing it back there for the next 5 minutes. Are you willing to try it? Okay, let's try. We just have a few minutes, and it can be helpful for some reflections to hear how your experiment in chanting today went. Various states of consciousness, like distracted, bored, indifferent, engaged, samadhi.
Hare Krishna. I liked the point of actively choosing to focus on the mantra. I don't have to lean into my thoughts. I can choose to shift my attention to focusing on it. And I found today that something that helped me become less distracted was to try to focus on every word of the mantra, because sometimes I would just be halfway through it and then my mind would just be gone because I was speeding. But when I'm listening to each word and waiting for the next one, I found myself to be less distracted.
Oh, thank you very much. Anybody else have any experience? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I found the controlled breathing exercise at the beginning to be really helpful, and I tried to maintain it throughout my chanting. But I guess I had a practical question in the sense that I think controlling your breathing and syncing it with the mantra forces you to chant slower. So when I was going a bit faster, it felt like I was hyperventilating. So, in Dham, I feel like there's extra time where it feels like, I could take 5 hours and chant and still there wouldn't be a problem. But, when we're at home and we have other responsibilities, how is the best?
Well, it's not necessarily that. It's just that you have to adjust it, and you can experiment with that and see what rhythm you can get into. That's one of the helpful parts about measuring your breath. I've noticed mostly to do it mentally, say the mantra just to start off, it's helpful, but it can be difficult to stay on pace, with the chanting. Although I do know some people that do that, and they're very deliberate about how they breathe, but you can get distracted that way also. Yes, Shikar.
When we're trying to embrace and then let go, my mind has the opposite reaction of letting go. So I get stuck in that thought for a while, and then it's really disturbing. So what do I do to prevent that?
The way of noticing it, and then noticing that you're the one watching it, the main distraction of the mind is when we identify with it. And there's a sense of, I have to solve this problem, or it's a concern to me. The more you can be sakshi, or a witness of it, and notice that, okay, I'm watching this, and you notice that it's energetic, either emotion or a particular thought that's usually connected with emotion, you can notice that from a distance and just step back from and say, oh, that's interesting. Who's the one watching this thought? Think, I'm watching it. I'm noticing that it's unfolding, and there's a feeling, a tightness in my chest, because there's something somebody said to me, and I have to do something about it. And you just take one little inch movement backwards and say, who's watching this? And when you become observant of the fact that you're watching it, then you see there's a difference between you and the thought. Prajahati yada kaman sarva partha manogatan. Krishna says in the Gita that prajahati means you step back a little bit and notice that the mind is the one that's manufacturing this thing. You don't have to buy it. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I had a question. Sometimes in the morning, my mind is really blank, and I understand the importance of setting an intention before chanting, but sometimes I can't think of any intention. So what do we do in that case?
You have a mantra. So Pancharatric system goes along with chanting Hare Krishna. Pancharatra, Bhagavat Marg, the chanting of Hare Krishna, spontaneous devotional service. Pancharatric vidhi means regulated service to the deity. So there's a way to wake up. If you've ever watched the people who do these sprints for 100 meters, and if you watch a video of it, it's half the time as they're getting ready in their blocks and making sure their fingers are on the ground just in the right way, and they're waiting for the starting gun. So when you wake up in the morning, if you have some ritual mantras that you start with, because you may be in a far-flung place when you're sleeping, but when you wake up to a series of mantras, and before you even start walking around, you have that set of mantras that you say to realign yourself. That's in the Pancharatra. Because if you have that, then you can realign and just set your intention. You can take somebody else's intention. Take Queen Kunti's intention or someone else's, and then just make it yours. There's no illegal aspect of plagiarism if you take a great person's prayer and just say it and then think about it deeply. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Harinam Prabhu, if you so desire, please empower us to bring our heartfelt, loving attention to your lotus feet when we chant your holy name. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Vanchakalpadrisha, Kripasinave, Vachapatitanam, Bhavnyo, Vaishnavibhyo, Namo Namaha, Namaste Koti Vaishnaviki Jai.